Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I want to talk about firearm safety and content creation because while there are a ton of gun tubers on this platform that make a lot of fantastic content, doing what these creators do is actually a lot harder than it looks. There are so many small details that go into making a good piece of firearms content and dozens of additional safety concerns if you're bringing a camera crew to the range. This is a topic that's been on my mind because while I'm not a gun tuber, I do have an interest in firearms, and I recently posted the first piece of firearms content on this channel in almost a decade. The experience was very educational for me, but not in the way that I initially anticipated. I thought that I would come away from this understanding and appreciating firearms more, but I actually came away from this experience understanding and appreciating the people who make this type of content. Even if these creators are controversial with their content, their personal lives, or political beliefs, I'm a big believer in giving credit where credit is due. And in this case, it's very much so due, and I wanted to share that perspective with you. So today we're going to be talking about some of the unexpected challenges of gun tubing, and you'll get a little bit of behind the scenes footage from my range experience. First up, it's important to keep in mind that a range video is actually a very physical performance comparable to exhibition athleticism or perhaps a concert dance routine. I can't imagine gun tubers would want to get compared to the Harlem Globetrotters or to Ariana Grande dancing on stage, but I feel that there's a lot of overlap there because there's a tremendous amount of physicality to carrying and handling the guns while also managing the mental game of hitting your lines and looking good for the camera. For those of you that don't know, and it shouldn't be many, firearms are quite heavy in real life. I think most of you logically know this, but you probably don't think about it as often. We're very used to carrying around truly weightless firearms in video games, airsoft guns, or watching them in action movies where they look light because they are light because they're props. So for those of you that have never been enlisted, it's quite easy to forget that lugging firearms around all day is physically exhausting. It's proper exercise like manual labor. An individual firearm can weigh between 5 and maybe 30 pounds on the higher end, and that means at a minimum you're carrying around a light workout worth of weight while trying to give a physical performance and hit your lines, which I think is very comparable to performing on stage or trying to do like some sort of show-off athleticism. While we had some polymer guns, it's important to keep in mind that most real weapons are made of metal, so they get very hot in the sun, and they get hotter still after being fired. On the topic of firing them, you're constantly going to have to reload the magazines, both putting individual bullets into the mag and swapping the mags all the time in between shoots. Oh, and I almost forgot, you're going to have to carry a couple 100 pounds of ammo to the range depending on what kind of weapon you intend to shoot, but ammunition itself is very heavy, so you're going to be lugging that around outside in the heat. In my case, I was at the Texas Defensive Shooting Academy in late April, so it wasn't terrible, but it was a long way from a temperate climate. I'm extremely grateful that my group planned ahead to have both air conditioning available and a ton of liquid IVs and hydration so that we didn't get dehydrated, have heat strokes, and die. It's just very easy to overheat on a gun range. My crew was, even with these considerations, the AC and the drinks, they were pretty much constantly fighting dehydration. And these things can be incredibly dangerous when you're mixing them with firearms because they make you think less clearly. When handling something that could be a weapon of death, you need to really be on your mental A game and not be exhausted, not be tired, not be on autopilot mode, but it's hard to do that when you're battling heat exhaustion. And this ties directly into the second part of the physical performance that I wanted to give compliments on, which is that it's very hard to hit your lines under these circumstances. Not a ton of people watching this video probably make videos of their own or do any kind of live performances, though I'm sure some of you have. So the best example for most of you is kind of like reciting the lines of that one poem you had to memorize in high school, or maybe when you were trying to do a really good job on your PowerPoint presentation for your college communications class. That's a skill set that not a lot of people naturally have. They have to train for it, which is why we have communication and acting classes and stuff like that. But imagine how bad it would have been to recite lines from that poem in high school in hot weather, in between gunshots, with a camera crew while carrying around 15 to 20 pounds of weight and maintaining perfect camera presence while not hurting anybody. That's not a particularly easy task to do, which is why I think the physicality of gun tubing is comparable to that of a high production value song and dance routine, like some of the ones where they do tricks and gymnastics and stuff in the middle of it, because you got to sing, you got to look good on camera, you got to do all this stuff safely. There's a lot of overlap there with gun tubing. Not everybody's cut out for this kind of work, and to be honest, I might not be either. It was quite hard for me to do. There was one particular mistake that I made 3 times, which was not maintaining eye contact with my target. We did a couple of walk and shoot type sessions so that I could add more commentary over various parts. And when we were doing that, I would kind of walk and talk to the camera, then we would swap to shooting the firearms, then rapidly put the firearms back into safety and go back to talking to the camera and kind of do our like walk and talks. More than once during these segments, I would line up and get sighted in on a target and then turn my head to look at the camera and talk to the camera while blind firing at the target. I was not keeping my eyes on the actual target. Now, in my case, luckily I hit every single time and nobody was in front of me, but it is a safety violation because I had no way of knowing that because I wasn't looking at what I was shooting. I wasn't looking at what I was shooting because I was trying to be lazy or flashy or something. I was just constantly distracted trying to maintain the good camera presence, multitasking, listening to directions from my crew, giving directions to the crew, and swapping back and forth really, really quickly. So I think it's very important to sort of edit those out and never show those, but it's also important to acknowledge that you make mistakes and that people will and can when they're doing this kind of content, which leads into the next section of safety. There's a whole wrinkle to this difficulty when you want to consider the safety of your camera crew. I would wager that a number of Americans watching this video have been to a gun range before. It's probably an indoor one or an outdoor one with closed off, well-defined bays that all point in one direction and probably with a range safety officer as well. Well, when you're out on a private range and you're filming, you don't have any of that and you don't have anybody telling you what to do either. You're just kind of out there on your own. So you have to be very mindful of your own safety, but mostly for the safety of the camera crew. Now, I don't know specifically what kind of cameras most gun tubers use. I assume DSLRs, but I chose to get my footage with a GoPro because it was very rugged, it was easy to use, everybody was familiar with how it works, and I felt that we get some really good close-up and kind of like 120 FPS slow-mo footage. That meant that a lot of the film crew, which would have been my wife or my friends, were more or less constantly orbiting around me while I was trying to get good-looking shots. So unlike filming with a DSLR, where you can be 5 to 10 yards away and still get a great shot with like rack focus and stuff, the GoPro requires you to be kind of inches away from the gun. And I had to be super mindful of where the gun was pointing so that I didn't barrel sweep any of my friends or my wife during these dynamic shots, or even just simple changes in positioning or miscommunications. We did a lot of hand-on-shoulder kind of camera work, where oftentimes my wife would put her hand on my shoulder and kind of lock in so that when I would move, she could always feel what direction my shoulders were turning so that there would never be an accidental barrel sweep. She would always know what direction the gun was about to turn to while holding the camera on the side. The next thing is that there is a necessary and nearly constant cadence of communication going on, like gun is hot, rotate to my right, hold fire, we're done here, safety on, safety off, too close, ceasefire, stop, whatever. And this is one area that my crew struggled with because we didn't actually plan these call-outs ahead of time. So everybody was trying to do their best to communicate properly and safely, but they were all kind of using their own parlance to communicate, which made things more confusing. This actually sounds a lot like season 2 of The Rehearsal, where Nathan Fielder talks about how important it is for pilots to be top-notch communicators because very small mistakes can kill people. And the same is true on a gun range. I'd highly encourage anybody to check out season 2 of The Rehearsal. And I think this is also true for gun tubers and their camera crews. You've got to keep in mind that the person with the firearm is already doing a physical performance, and their mind is somewhat split between that physicality and hitting their lines for the camera, and split one more time to try to maintain safety for the camera crew. So the point of all of this is that it was a lot to keep up with, and it was not nearly as intuitive or as easy as you might think. Oh, and in the section about safety, there were some things that didn't make it into the original video for safety purposes. We talked about one of them with the Dragunov failing, but weapon failures in general were quite a big problem on the range. We had weapons out there that we could not film because they either jammed too frequently or had failures that made them prone to harming people. The best example of this would be that I bought a Bison SMG, like from Call of Duty, or technically a Stuff and Things Stizon magazine rework. It's like an American modification because a real Bison is super illegal to own. But I got one of the mags separately, and I converted my own NAC 9mm AK into being what I thought was the correct mode to accept the mag, and I did a ton of work on it. But ultimately, I got a defective magazine from Stuff and Things. My understanding is that the new Palmetto State Armory Bison weapons are much better and have a lower failure rates, but I got one really early into production, so what we had was a jamming machine. Concerningly, it also had a tendency to rotate bullets in weird directions as they were jamming, which I just don't like them looking at me backwards out of the gun. I don't know what was going on with that. So the crew had to make a decision to either try to repair this weapon on the range or to maybe put it in single shot only so we could shoot one and then unjam the second round, or to maybe just not use the weapon at all. It may seem like a really easy and obvious choice to just not use this weapon, but in my case, I bought the Bison just for the purpose of this video and had planned to make it the centerpiece. It was the rarest, most unique, coolest, least seen thing, and we were planning to make that the thumbnail and the section that got the most love. And unfortunately, I had to choose to forego that centerpiece in order to guarantee a greater degree of safety for myself and my crew. Not everybody is going to be able to make that decision easily or clear-headedly because there's a sort of sunk cost fallacy going on right there. And just beyond that, sort of the decisions you make, you got to keep in mind that weapon failures in general are incredibly dangerous. Now would be the perfect time to talk about the contractor who was on shoot with us all day and demoing weapons. There were a lot of questions and comments in the original video asking who is the contractor, what are they doing there, what is the Radiata Corporation, where did they serve, etc., etc. And I have to keep a lot of that to myself because the contractor is a friend of mine that wanted to keep their identity private. They are an FFL, and they served a variety of very important roles on the shoot. First of all, being an FFL meant that they could own and possess fully automatic weapons, and that they could import rare or more difficult weapons. It should be obvious to all of you that I did not spend $60,000 to $70,000 on all of these guns just for the video, nor do I have the licenses or qualifications to own something that's full auto. So pretty much actually every single weapon that we used that day belonged to the contractor. The contractor, other than supplying weapons, was there to oversee safety, to make sure that we weren't using these inappropriately. If they were to jam, the contractor would take them apart and fix the jam. If there was an issue with a sight or a scope or a suppressor or pretty much anything with the gun, for myself and for the crew of J-Hub and Jessica, we were immediately hands-off. Contractor swoops in and fixes that problem. It got bad when we were using the Stuff and Things Bison, the Stizon. It kept jamming over and over again, and we initially at one point decided maybe what we could do is keep it in single shot only and just shoot one round at a time and then unjam it every time it jams, but like fix it with editing magic. That ultimately ended up looking terrible, but the contractor was at least there to help. The contractor was also there to demo and teach us how to use some of the more complex weapons. We covered like 10 guns in the video, and every single one of them has a different fire selector, a different safety mechanism, a different way to load it, a different way to chamber rounds, different recommendations. Don't touch this part or you lose your fingers. Be careful, this kicks a lot. You should hold it this way. Just tons and tons of instructions given by the contractor so that we know how to operate the guns that we are demoing and experiencing live with you in the video. The downside is that I think I went first for pretty much everything, being the sickest, so I got the fastest and shortest demo. Jessica and J-Hub went second and third in most cases, respectively, so they got to see how the guns worked. There were so many times in my video that I edited out that I loaded a gun incorrectly. I think there were 2 times that the magazine literally just fell out of the weapon because I didn't slap it in hard enough. The contractor was there to make sure we're loading things, to make sure the weapons are functioning, to make sure we're looking cool and competent, and we we can fix some things with editing magic. So the contractor was absolutely invaluable for this shoot. They are a weapons expert, a wealth of knowledge. They can demo the weapons, teach the weapons, oversee the safety, and just be present to be filmed for some of the cooler demos like the P90 on the bus. If you're ever thinking about making a range video, but you're not a firearms expert, that's okay as long as you find somebody who is a firearms expert and you bring them to the shoot so they can help smooth over some of these difficulties. So contractor, if you're watching, thanks again, man. Moving along, there are considerable filming and audio editing difficulties with making range content. The last place I want to give credit where credit is due is to whoever gets the unfortunate task of having to edit a firearms video. It is so much more work to edit one of those than it is almost any other type of vlog or piece of content on this platform that doesn't involve special effects. For the one video I posted, I more or less had to tag team edit this with my editor on and off over the course of about a week just to get it looking decent. We put so much work into that to polish it up. There were concerns about the video quality as well because of the shock wave of firearms. Now, what you don't see and what doesn't really capture very well unless there's smoke or something is when you shoot a firearm, it's an explosion. There's a concussion. So there's a shock wave of air that emanates around the end of the barrel. And that shock wave is powerful enough to temporarily distort or in some cases even permanently damage camera sensors. It's not particularly kind to lenses either. So you have to keep in mind that these guns make literal shock waves of air that come out and hit everything around them. So when filming, you have to be relatively far away with a zoom lens, or you need a camera that is somewhat shockwave resistant, which is why we went with the GoPro. It's also difficult for the camera person to not flinch when they're just right there next to the gun being popped off. And it's difficult to keep everything in a nice tight frame when the guns literally kick and jump around due to their recoil. But the visual problems are minor compared to the problem of audio. Oh my God, the biggest issue with this video was editing all the audio for it. So for those of you that watched the whole video, you probably saw that I struggled maintaining a consistent audio quality in conversations and keeping the balance right and the guns not too, nasty or whatever. I definitely had some audio problems in my video, but they come from real reasons. If you're filming a range video, you're probably outdoors, and that means a lot of wind, which is going to ruin the audio from any sort of onboard camera mic for any phone that you might have. You've also absolutely got to use a lapel, or there's no chance of your voice being heard over the sound of the gunshots. Not that lapels make it easy, because it's very difficult to edit and balance the audio of the lapel right next to your neck, because you're going to talk and then shoot a few rounds, blow that out at maximum volume, and then go back to talking. So editing that's not particularly easy. It's just a constant battle to get that sensitivity right so your voice sounds natural and the gunshots don't blow up people's ears. And I had a lot of difficulty with this, and I started doing something incorrect in the video, which is I started yelling and doing sort of theater stage voice while recording. That's just the thing that comes naturally to me when filming outdoors because of my years' experience on YouTube indicate that when you're outside, you're typically in a louder environment and you need to be louder and with a more booming and boastful voice and stuff like that. But what ends up happening is you end up being too loud for the lapel that's right next to your neck, and you're blowing out the audio, which is very difficult to correct unless you've got I had 16-bit. I probably should have had a 32-bit lapel, but that's on me. And there's a difficulty in communication again because you're wearing hearing protection, or if you're on a range, you should be wearing hearing protection. Don't blow your ears up for no reason. But the camera crew is also going to be wearing hearing protection. So in order to communicate with them, you do basically have to yell at them, which again ruins the audio even further. So I constantly found myself being too loud and battling against the audio. And before we move into the more personal bits, there's a fun fact and a fun story about the range we went to. So we went to a place called the Texas Defensive Shooting Academy, or TDSA range. It's technically located in Ferris, Texas, but it's all of 3 minutes outside of Dallas County. It's probably the biggest, bestest gun range in Dallas, just barely outside of the city when you're hitting country proper. The place was huge. It was absolutely mental. A number of you pointed out that it's also the range where Colin Noir does most of his filming. We didn't see him that day. He must have just been editing, probably fighting audio battles. It had multiple 100-meter bays, millions of tires piled up into gigantic walls, functional and non-functional vehicles everywhere, ponds, training bays, tactical areas, and a gyrocopter that I didn't get to fly. I do, however, seriously respect the owner of this range because he takes safety very seriously. There's a part in the range video where I'm standing there talking with my wife. I think I'm actually talking, I forget what gun we're even talking about, but you can hear all these gunshots going on in the background. That's because one of the other guests that rented one of the other super bays at the range just decided to go full crazy that day. I don't know all of the specifics about what got into this lead-poisoned boomer's brain, but for some reason he thought it was appropriate to just mag dump into the duck ponds. Apparently the big splashes in the water just looked really cool to him, so there was just some guy out there spraying and praying with his AK into the pond to make the splashes as big as possible, I suppose. And I believe he was also trying to skip bullets off the pond water to see what would happen. So for those of you that are unaware, this is not safe range behavior at all, and I've never seen it at any range I've ever been to before. At one point, we hear that guy stop shooting, and we just hear a whole ton of yelling and what I will call advanced swearing for the purposes of this video. The owner fully kicked the other person off of the range and voided his membership, like, instantly. This was a person who had been a range member for multiple decades, and I have no idea how much money they spent on that. It's not a low-cost range because of its quality, but he got instantly lifetime banned for being unsafe, which also instantly increased my respect for the owner. The owner also came over to apologize to us and said the person was shooting, I believe, in the general direction of the wall that separated us, and that wall was not rated to stop the bullets properly, so it was kind of a dangerous situation for everybody, which is something to keep in mind. Unless you're on a private range, the other yahoos can put you in danger. And then finally, the last bit of this video is a little personal, a little more behind the scenes. I want to talk about battling against my own disabilities here. As many of you know, I have way too many disabilities and have narrowly avoided dying several times over the last few years. And I'm unfortunately somewhat infamous for my bed streaming setup and gaming from a bed or making podcast appearances from a bed. This is because I broke my spine and I contracted a tick-borne illness very similar to Lyme disease at the same time. So I got a broke back that can't be operated on, and all of my joints are pretty much trash. It's so bad that I actually rented an RV so that I could lay on the bed in the back because I was physically unable to sit upright long enough to drive to the range, which was less than an hour away. I'm also not able to be upright for more than about an hour before the sciatica gets to me, and sitting is not restorative. I cannot sit. I would rather just stand at attention like military style than I would sit. So for me, the most logical solution seemed to be to spend the money to rent a whole RV so that I would have a bed on wheels to try to make this range day happen. And that ended up being one of the best decisions I've ever made. Not for the reason I thought. The bed was great, needed the bed, helped me a ton. But what really helped everybody was that the RV had a big boy air conditioner system, which was very, very useful. So I basically alternated between doing about an hour of filming while I was upright and then 30 minutes to an hour of resting for break times while the crew would eat or reload the weapons or go film B-roll or something like that. I was up on my feet as much as possible, but still needed a lot of breaks. Really, everybody did. And I also now realize how extremely ambitious this project was. I was attempting to film 14 guns in a single 8-hour session, so roughly one new firearm every 30 minutes. I would later discover that most Guntubers film 1 or potentially 2 weapons per day. I tried to do roughly 7 times that amount while being more than moderately disabled. It was such an outlandish decision on my end. It was so ambitious, so audacious. I really wish I could have just filmed 1 or 2 weapons instead. I feel like that would have been a lot smarter. It probably also would have resulted in a lot higher quality per weapon. I've never done this before, so I really didn't have a good or clear idea of what a normal production day for a Guntuber would look like. I was just out there winging it. But yeah, I realized how foolish I was. I was out there trying to do almost an order of magnitude more work than an experienced soldier while being so disabled that I literally can't even sit down. That was peak foolishness on my part. It was one of the most physically taxing things that I've ever done in my life, but ultimately it didn't hurt me. I obtained no new injuries from the gun range, which was a blessing. Got a little sore, a little tired, a little sunburnt and stuff, but we managed it pretty well. I just realized what a clown I was trying to go for that, like just that many guns in such a short period of time. It's kind of like fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Overall, the range experience was extremely fun for me. I got to learn a ton of new fun facts about firearms. I got to experience my favorite video game weapons in real life, and it was probably the highlight of the last several years for me because I spent way too many of those years partially bedbound. Had an absolute blast, no pun intended, and I think everybody that went had a fantastic time too. It was an overall really wholesome experience for me, and I really value all of the things that I was able to learn from it. I hope that all of you were able to learn something useful from this video, and if you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.